This is the Book Deal Podcast,
where you will discover the inspiring stories of the authors behind your favourite books.
No matter what stage of writing you are at, we've got you covered. I'm Tina Strong.
And I'm Madeline Cleary, and join us as we pull back the curtain of published authors.
One deal at a time.
The Book Deal Podcast acknowledges the traditional owners of the land and waters which it's recorded on, and pays respect to their elders past, present and emerging. It's Madeline here. Tina and I normally have our catch-up episode this week, but instead we invited fellow writer Charlotte Guest to join us to answer all our questions about bookselling. Charlotte is a writer and bookseller on Wadawurrung Country in Geelong, Victoria. Her writing has been published in national and international literary journals, and in 2023 she received her PhD in creative writing from Deakin University, and she was awarded a Varuna Fellowship in 2025 for her currently unpublished manuscript, The Kookaburra. Charlotte manages an indie bookshop, The Bookbird, in Geelong, and was shortlisted for the 2024 Bookseller of the Year award for this work. I met Charlotte at the Toronto Writers Festival, and over some spontaneous drinks, it didn't take me long to form the opinion that Charlotte is a fast rising star in our industry. So enjoy this conversation. Hi, Tina. How are you?
I'm really good, thanks, Madeline. How are you? Another Friday night recording.
And another wineless Friday night as well.
I know. I have tea. Yep.
I have water.
But that's okay.
We need to get some our Friday wines back, I think.
I know.
Yeah.
It could make it a bit more funnier. But it's still an exciting night.
It is an exciting night. We have a special guest, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Who is also a guest, and people will realise that soon. We have Charlotte Guest on the show. Welcome, Charlotte.
Hi, Charlotte.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we're so happy that you are here with us on our Friday night. Do you have a wine?
I don't. At least we all match in our winelessness.
We bonded over wine, didn't we, Charlotte? When
We
first met?
did. It's very strange to be speaking and neither of us have a wine. I feel like.
know. Actually, yeah, every other occasion, I think, well, at Willie Lit, Sorrento, it's what you do at Writers' Festivals.
Even texting, we've said, "Do you have a wine?" I've got a wine. Not every convo needs to be fueled by wine. So
that's right. That's right. I'm just like putting my hand on my head. I'm just like, oh my gosh, yes, we must sound like winos. But
I know. But tonight we're bucking the trend.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. So we thought we'd invite you on, Charlotte, and we really appreciate you coming because we often as writers have a lot of questions, I think, for booksellers, and we want to work hand in hand with you, and I think it's an important part of our industry. But we thought it's a really good opportunity to talk to someone like you because you were shortlisted for Bookseller of the Year, which sounds amazing, and I want to talk to you all about that and what that means.
Thank you.
Which is, yeah, just an incredible thing. But you're also an amazing reader, a writer as well in your own right, and you are an excellent facilitator and interviewer of authors too. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, you have such a diverse background, so I'm really interested. And I actually did see that it was announced that you're going to be interviewing Jane Harper on her tour in October, which is amazing.
So excited for the Wheeler Centre regional programming in Geelong, which will be amazing. Yeah, I've been really thrilled to be asked.
How does it feel to be an interviewer of such incredible, high-profile writers? You are definitely, I think, an interviewer in demand.
Oh, thank you. I don't know about that, but I mean, it's just such a joy to be able to ask questions directly from the horse's mouth. I mean, you know, how many people get the opportunity to read a book and quiz the author on everything and anything that occurred to you during the reading experience? I mean, it's a real privilege.
Have you always been a reader and a writer, Charlotte?
Surprisingly, no. When I was a child, I didn't actually read as much as people might think. I was really an outdoors and athletic and sporty kid. I spent most of my time outdoors. We lived on a sort of bush property growing up, and I spent most of the day climbing trees. I used to climb a tree and keep a logbook of my neighbor's movements when I was a child. So there was
That
like,
is gold.
yeah, I built this platform which was not structurally sound, and it was so that I could look to the driveway of the neighbor's house, and then I had a little logbook that was wrapped in plastic so it didn't, curl in the rain, and I would say like 10:05 left for the shops. 10:15 returned from shops. It's really odd. I mean, I was clearly an only child, like no one else to occupy
Oh,
myself
did your
with.
neighbors know this?
I have no idea. I mean, I couldn't have been that discreet. I
They
was
were just
like
like, there's
7.
Charlotte again in the
Yeah,
tree.
with her
Better do
little
something
binoculars.
interesting.
Yeah,
Did you feel like you were a detective?
maybe. I don't know. I mean, I never came upon any spectacular crimes in my time as a detective, but the thing that was sort of a literary touchstone as a child was because we had this sort of big backyard. My dad got really into the faraway tree more than I did. He was really into it, and he made this topsy-turvy land at the top of the trees. So he
Wow.
had, yeah, it was beautiful. He had passageways and platforms, not the one I built, which was dangerous, but the ones that he built, and all these little figures in the trees like Saucepan Man and, Moonface. And that was beautiful. So he sort of brought that book to life for me, and I never forgot it. So I remembered it when I came back to reading a little bit older, that he brought that to life in that way, which I think isn't, I don't know, it's over the top, which is typically my dad, but it was meaningful. It was a really meaningful experience where the book was no longer confined to the page.
Mm, it's beautiful.
Mm, it was.
I'm curious then, what drew you back to reading? I mean, obviously your dad's created this wonderful, magical, faraway tree lived experience. Is what brought you back?
I remember as maybe about 14, I was reading again sort of casually, but when I was 14, I read A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess.
What a book
And
to read at
I
14 to get you
I
back.
don't know how, I mean, for a kid that wasn't a reader, I really don't know why I picked it up because it was really challenging, and it's
Mm.
challenging for every reader, I think, because half of it's written in like gibberish. And that idea of what you can do with language and how you can expand the mind, because, the words used throughout are derived from some Russian words, some gobbledygook, some, complete neologisms. And the edition that I had didn't have a glossary because a lot of the modern editions come with a glossary. And the effect of it not having a glossary is that you worked it out for yourself, and you had this palpable sense of grammar and meaning making and contextual learning of words, because if you have a sentence like we were making up our Razadukes what to do with the evening, then you can figure out that Razadukes must be we were figuring out our, making up our minds what to do
Mm.
with the evening. But you had to infill that yourself and figure it out from the
Mm.
paragraphs and the sentences. And it was just such an incredible experience. And then I thought, wow, there must be more like this. And then off we went.
And what about writing? Because you are also a writer. You've written for multiple journals. You have a PhD in creative writing. You've written a novel as well. Um,
Unpublished.
Unpublished. Well, soon to be published,
Oh,
perhaps.
thanks. One hopes, but we'll see. We'll see. Um, Writing. Do you know, I really don't. I kept I kept that logbook of my neighbor's movements, and that morphed into a vicious diary of like, a 7-year-old being like, Mum took me to Toys R Us and we couldn't get both the jumping beans and the this, or and the what were those little fish things that you could have that turned into
Sea
like
monkeys.
sea monkeys? Yes. I was desperate for sea monkey. There was a lot of entries on sea monkeys and whether I'd obtained them or not, which was always I hadn't. And those those dinosaur things that were like they absorbed water and you
Mhm.
put them in a in a
Yes.
yeah, this is like 90s and early 2000s toy nostalgia. And you put them in a tank and they would crack open and then they would become a dinosaur. So
Mm.
I kept a diary a lot, and it was just a lot of complaining about the toys I didn't have. And then that was kind of this, I don't know, it just, I really, apart,
Mm.
but your creative writing, I'm not sh really sure, but I know that I was always complaining in the written word.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not entirely true. There were other things in there, but I remember going through, you hear about writers who have always journaled and then they, revisit those journals decades later, and it's like this really beautiful walk down memory lane and or just, discovering how that seed of writing was planted, etc. And I thought, I'll do that because I've still got them. And I opened them and they were dreadful. Like they were boring, and I don't know, they were slightly like weirdly nasty, but like not about anyone, but just about like, I don't know,
They were just
yeah,
honest.
sea monkeys. So
Well, that was clearly something that was very important to you
very
at the
important.
time. But do you think, I wonder if, did you journal, Madeline, as a child?
I was pretty sporadic a
I
journaler.
can imagine that Madeline's journal, if you looked back on it, would be beautiful and have this
Yes.
wonderful trip down memory lane. I'm certain of it.
It's more like, oh, I complained about my brother or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
bad at
But see,
school.
do you think it's because we're clearly writers and we're writers at heart but as a 6 and a 7 and an 8 and a 9 and a 10-year old, that's we don't know what that means and we don't know what that writing is. We just know that we want to write, so we write about whatever, how boring and terrible. And I feel like I probably use dot points to to write things because that's just how I do. So not much creativity there, but yeah, maybe that's our first step, right?
I do remember I used to make this family magazine called The Family Focus as a child.
How old were
And
you?
I'd
Very precocious, Charlotte.
like no, I was just like there were no siblings. I like cannot stress how only this experience was. Um so and we lived way out of town. So like friends I mean, it felt way out of town to me. It really probably wasn't, but it felt ages. There's no bus stop or there's no this or that. Um, so I wrote and published, as it printed off, this magazine called The Family Focus, and there would be like family member of the week, but there was only two to choose from. There's only mum or dad. So Um, and then like creating a crossword where all the clues related to whatever we'd done that week or things to do with the pets or whatever. I don't know. So I mean that was something. I think it was probably about 10 when I started doing that.
That's
Um,
great.
yeah, it occupied the weekend.
So,
Yeah.
how does one go from writing the Family Focus magazine to getting a PhD in creative writing at Deakin University and then becoming a store manager at Bookbird in Geelong? Tell us
Oh,
about that journey.
well, it all feels very like one natural progression. I before I did the PhD, I used to work at a university press in Perth, Western Australia, and that I started doing straight after finishing honours in literature. I mean, I don't know, it was always just sort of a follow your interests, follow your passions type pathway. Um, and working at the press was such a great experience in terms of how the books actually get made from submission, acquisition, um, assessments as to who's the intended reader, what's the intended market, the funding, different funding streams, and how what roles are done in-house, what roles are done out of house, particularly in a smaller press. Um, that was just such an incredible snapshot of the entire production line or lifespan of a book. Because my role at that press was a lot of the marketing and the publicity. So the end part of that process when you have a physical product to market. And things like author care, which is stepping, say, a first-time author through that whole process, because it can be so and difficult to grasp when it's your first time, and it's it can feel a very closed industry, um, which in many ways it is. And then I moved to Victoria to do the PhD, uh, because it presented an opportunity to have really dedicated time and space to write a full-length work of fiction. And it was, except that it coincided with COVID, like almost exactly, which made a already isolating experience even more so, because you do hear PhD candidates say a lot of the time about how, when it's self-driven research and you don't necessarily have coursework or that contact time with other classmates, that it is different to, say, doing your undergraduate or your master's, for example, where you do have that core component of coursework and that contact time. So that it was not quite what I envisaged. It was because that time wasn't what anyone envisaged or expected, of course. So that was 3, 4 years, and that whole time I was there, I was still working at the bookstore, and then just I've just sort of stuck around. So, being the veteran of the bookstore, I'm now managing the bookstore, and it's just, I don't know, I just love it. It's a really small but mighty little space in Geelong. It's the only independent in Geelong, um, which is a bit of a strange badge of honour to have, because Geelong really should have the population to support more than one independent bookstore. And I'm sure it does. It just so happens that at the moment we're the only one. I'm sure that won't always be the case. Along the Surf Coast is a network of amazing independent bookstores. So the Surf Coast and the Bellarine is sort of our community of independents. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's just such a rich and varied job. Anything from buying, which in itself is fascinating because there's so much that gets published, from the major, the multinationals down to the independent presses, things that are indent titles or import titles and locally published works. And when you only have however many square foot of shelf space, there's a whole there's a whole raft of things that you have to think about before you decide what you can stock. And it's that whittling down process that I find really fascinating.
Well, let's talk about that,
Yeah,
because
sorry,
we are very fascinated about that. And I think there's a lot of discussion at the moment, and Tina and I had a quick chat before this as well. A lot of chat from particularly debut authors about what happens when your book no longer is in that new release window, and then it moves to the shelf, and what decisions do booksellers make when looking at their window, and it all starts, I think, with the buying. So really interested to hear, yeah, what are you looking for, what are you looking at, how do you make those, how do you whittle that down? There's such a huge breadth of books being published.
it's so tough. I really feel for I'm not sure how to put it. It's so cutthroat, and in a way that doesn't always feel good, because it's this awkward marriage of art and commerce
Mm.
in this space, which is not, necessarily unique to bookselling, but you know how much time and love and effort has gone into this piece, and the cycle of releases and the cycle of returns, and managing your stock levels and all the sort of monetary stuff that goes into that means that it is quite cut cutthroat. I keep coming back to the phrase cutthroat, but yeah, because you're looking, I mean, particularly in our store, which is very, very small, it's all about real estate, shelf real estate, and what's getting the marketing and publicity budgets versus what is really powerful by word of mouth, and those two are not necessarily the same things. You'll have your staff tastes and their interest areas, which you will stock more of because you know that the hand selling aspect of book selling is huge. You could have a book that's out there with all the marketing budget in the world, but if you have another book from a small independent press that one bookseller has adored, you will probably end up selling more units of that. But it really, there's a returns window that not everybody knows about, where once you tick over that window and you haven't sent it back for credit, or you haven't swapped the trade or the larger format down to the B format, you're stuck with that stock, and it does take space.
Could we talk about sale or return? Because that is not something that's commonly known.
Yeah, it's funny because New Zealand, for example, unless it's changed in recent years, doesn't have this system. And I'm really glad I'm not a buyer in New Zealand's market. If this is still the case, it may well have changed, but it certainly didn't used to be. Whatever they would order that is a firm sale order, or an order that you can't return. And I'm really glad that we have it here, because it means that you can experiment with things. It means you can trial things that might be a little bit more unusual, because the way that sale and return works is that you order in an item and you have to keep it for at least 3 months to give it a chance to sell, a chance to be discovered, reviewed, etc. After that 3 months, you then have up to 12 months to send it back to the distributor, and you will get a full credit for that item that goes against your account that you can then reallocate to order something else. So we are constantly doing returns because it means that we can change. And I know a lot of bookstores do returns in batches. They'll do them every 3 months or whatever. But, I found it easiest to do it as a sort of constantly evolving thing, because space is at such a premium. But it just means that your inventory can constantly evolve and almost breathe. It gives it this organic feel. And when you're ordering, it means you don't have to really stress over the fact that if I get 5 copies and I only sell 2, I've got this much, I'm holding up my fingers here, I've got this much real estate that I've allocated to this book on the shelf that I'm not sure if I can move it or not. So, yeah, it encourages more risk taking, I think, in the ordering side of things, which is good for authors. But it does mean that 3 months down the track, you might start to see some books come back, but that's very normal.
Yeah. Can I ask, Charlotte, so what is a normal amount of books for you to order in the first instance? And I'm sure it changes depending on genre and and author. But for a standard debut, say, so it doesn't have a history, how many books generally would you be looking at?
Bear in mind that we're a very small store, so it might sound really minuscule, but we are such a tiny shop. For a debut that you're trialing the book, you love the sound of it, I would probably usually start with 3 units. And the reason for that is because if something has been selected through the big group buy, which is from a lot of places, this place called Book People, which is the newly rebranded Australian Bookseller Association, so the national body, they will often do scale discounts for items that are new that the publishers want to promote or get you to pay attention to. And the minimum for that for you to get an extra trade discount is usually 3. And 3 gives you enough to make it look really good on the shelf, look plentiful, the way that we've designed the layout anyway, but it doesn't overcommit you.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. Thank you, because I think a lot of people don't realize that it can be so low for, like, not low, but 3 is a good number, like you said. But I think a lot of authors don't realize that that can be quite common for a lot of indie booksellers anyway, that 3 is the standard number, and sometimes less.
Sometimes less. Because the beauty of it is that, for the publishers that have distribution through the national distributors, their delivery time is, maybe only 3 business days. So you can get your initial order of 3. It can be a bit longer. Let's say 7 days on average. But you can get your initial order of 3, and if you start to see this is something that people are paying attention to, you can immediately do your next top up of 6 within a
Yeah.
week.
Yeah.
So it's flexible like that. It's not set in stone.
I want to talk about the power of indie bookshops as well, because there is, I think, a power, and you mentioned it before, that while a book could have so much buzz around it, lots of marketing budget, a lot of publicity hype, there are those books that particularly indie bookshops can champion, and these perhaps don't have that same buzz and hype and spend. And a lot of debut authors often do fall into that category, because often publishers will just see what sticks. They'll give you a go and see what happens. And so there is a lot of power behind that hand selling. How do you think authors can work with indie bookshops to, I suppose, rise above the pack?
If you're a local to an area and you have the opportunity to introduce yourself to your independent bookseller, um, absolutely do that. To have a face to a book is so powerful, and to know that they're local to your area, because a lot of independent bookstores want to champion their local authors. Um, Often we get sent ARCs, which are advanced reading copies of books, so that booksellers have the opportunity to read something pre-release, and that is really important as well. That's part of the marketing and publicity budget, to actually print those ARCs, because that's not cheap. A really good example of a book that has been beloved in our shop and is really like odd is one that came out through Giramondo, called It Lasts Forever and Then It's Over. And it is a literary zombie novel, and it is the strangest read, but it is so incredible. It won the Novel Prize, which was first won by Jessica Au, Cold Enough for Snow, a few years ago. This was, I believe, last year's winner. Um, and it is a strange bird, but we have really taken it under our wing, to extend the metaphor clumsily. Um, and it had practically no, I mean, it did get reviewed because it is excellent, but in terms of that marketing machine, like, it just wasn't one that you were going to see advertised everywhere or on social media everywhere. But we have sold so many copies because it's a little gem, and it's something that we've championed. In terms of what authors can do, I think that communication and being approachable and being open, and also, I guess, being aware of things like, an opening order of only 3 is not unusual. It's quite normal. And yeah, just the being aware of the context, I suppose, of how many books there are contending for shelf space. It's really tough, but it's tough but not impossible. Yeah.
And what are some things that authors shouldn't do? There's a few. Give us some do's and don'ts of, approaching a bookstore as well, because this is, something that we talk about in a debut crew a little bit as well. How do we go in there and say hi? Because no one wants to look like they're just coming in to say hi. So it helps sell their book, say, but to try and make that genuine connection. What are some tips?
And I'd add to that too, there's a few schools of thought that's going around, like theories as well. Like
Oh,
some,
are there?
yeah, that we get advice that we should only do the official book tour, that's been organized by our publishers, that bookstores know that we're coming, whereas others are saying, no, if you're in the area, drop in, say hi.
So from my perspective, um, I think that probably the best approach is to have an email contact first, so that the bookseller can prepare for your visit, as in make sure that they have copies of your book, for starters, because there's nothing that makes you feel worse if they've just happened to have come in and maybe you sold the last copy, you didn't realize that they were coming in 2 days later and you haven't had a chance to reorder it. Um, so that pre-warning is really valued because it just gives you a chance to get organized and make sure that you can welcome them warmly and in the fashion that you'd like to. Um, Something that was a really interesting thing when you do email uh, a bookstore is to just highlight who the publisher or the distributor is, because say, for example, you have a publisher that may be a smaller press, but they are an agent or agented by a major distributor. Um, Sometimes if you don't highlight that, it looks like it does appear that it's independently published and that would therefore have to be a consignment arrangement. Whereas say, for example, you have, I'm trying to think of an example,
So,
as if,
like for example, I think it's a Fremantle Press is distributed by Harper.
well, they're Penguin, but
Oh, they're
yes,
Penguin. Okay.
that's a good example.
Mm.
Like Fremantle Press, most booksellers would be familiar with, but um, there's some smaller outfits, say, for example, a new press called Pink Shorts Press in Adelaide, who are doing some really interesting books at the moment. They're a new publisher on the block, but they are distributed by Simon and Schuster. So if you are one of their authors and you're just alerting your local bookstore or bookstores about your book, if you happen to mention that it's through Simon and Schuster and Pink Shorts Press, that bookstore will know that they can get it through the main easy click a button channel, which is it's just appealing to a bookseller or a book buyer to know that it's an easy order, they can experiment on it, and it is able to be returned if it doesn't happen to sell, rather than a consignment arrangement that requires paperwork, individual ordering through an independent supplier, which is not to say that bookstores don't do that, particularly independents do, but you want to make it as easy as possible for them to take the book.
And how early should writers engage with bookstores? Should they do this after the books come out, or should they, because I know you're buying probably 3 to 4 months in advance. When's the perfect time to have those conversations?
Oh, look, I mean, I'm sure other book buyers have um, some real preferences. I mean, when it comes to us, it's either myself or the owner, Anna, who is placing those orders. I really don't mind. If you're going 6 months out, that's possibly a bit early because it's not really on the radar yet. Um, Even if it's post-release, it's easy to get things in pretty quickly, like I said. But um, I'd say as a general rule, maybe a month before release just gives, particularly the smaller bookstores who may be sort of dealing with, however many multiple tasks a day, it allows them to sort of flag it, sit it, attend to it, and they can still order and get it in time for release if they wish. So maybe a month, I'd say.
Perfect. That's very good tangible advice.
And what about signing your book, Charlotte? There's been some people like to just go into the bookshop and pick up the book and sign it, regardless. What's your shaking your head?
My
Yes, without asking. So, yep. So that sounds like not the way to go.
Not the way to go, only because it makes you panic for a second that someone's just vandalizing a book. I mean, obviously, people don't tend to do that, but I think introducing yourself, I don't know, just in terms of that exchange or that encounter, it's probably best not to just pick something off the shelf and start scribbling in it. Um, I know it probably can be really daunting to go into a bookstore and introduce yourself in that way. Um, but I think that would be preferable than to just sort of go undercover and try and scribble and get out quickly. Because the other part of that interaction is that usually the bookseller will want to have an opportunity to take some photos and promote on their social media channels. And it just makes it incredibly awkward if they're like intercepting you mid scribble saying, just checking you're the author. Um, yeah, so I probably would make it apparent that that's what you're doing.
Yes,
It's actually a
and
book.
they
Oh, sorry, you go, Tina.
I was going to say they often have these really nice little stickers that they put on the front too that says signed by the author, which is quite
Exactly,
nice.
yeah. And anything that sets your book apart from its neighbors on the
Mm,
shelf, whether that's a glossy sticker, which is what we have, if it's been signed, that stock will normally go face out, and you'd be amazed at the difference it makes if something is
mm.
face out versus spine out. All those little things do make a difference.
Exactly. No, I think that's some really, really good tips. And I think being able to, if you're just popping into a store, say you don't plan it, you haven't had time to email, if you're walking into a store, if you go and find your books on the shelf, so it's not like you're going up saying, "Oh, I'm the author, do you have my books?" and then having that awkward interaction if the bookstore doesn't. You could go, if you find your books on the shelf and then take it up, that's a really good way to introduce yourself and say, "Oh, I'm the author, would you
Absolutely.
like me to sign it?"
Absolutely. Yeah, of course. There's no real hard and fast rules, but yeah, if you happen to be in a bookstore and you see your book, come up to us and tell that that's such a beautiful moment. We love that.
There you go. You've heard it on the Book Deal podcast because we have a few authors being very anxious and nervous about doing that. So put that aside, go and introduce yourselves to the booksellers. And booksellers are very nice people as well. Everyone likes books, so
Mhm.
of course, they're great people.
You have to say that. I'm sitting right here. Although you used to be a bookseller as well, didn't you, Madeline?
Years ago, a decade ago. Yes,
Were
yes.
you a bookseller as well, Tina?
No, no, I am the only one here that has not been a bookseller.
Maybe
I'd
one
love,
day.
maybe one day.
Hello, lovely listeners. My name is Kasey Whitelaw, and I'm thrilled to tell you all about my debut picture book, Flute, A Dolphin's Wild Journey Home. It's illustrated by the super talented Jenny Goodman and published by the wonderful team at Wombat Books. Flute, a playful dolphin, is separated from her dolphin party. Alone and in danger, she begins a wild journey back to the safety of her family and friends. But will she make it home? Flute is an inspiring story about friendship, support, and determination. It also raises vital awareness about the threats dolphins face from boating and noise pollution worldwide. This story was actually inspired by my 7 years working at Monkey Mia in the stunning Shark Bay World Heritage Area in Western Australia. This is where I had the privilege of working alongside the real Flute, her family, and all her wonderful friends. I was able to watch their busy lives full of mischief and mayhem. And this is actually where I discovered their deep need for friendship, community, and support. Inspired by these true events and real friendships, Flute takes readers on a fun and wild ride. You'll journey along with her as she makes her way through a seagrass maze, slips and slides off a sandbar, dodges stinging sea jellies, and fends off a tiger shark. Plus, the storyline is full of fascinating facts about dolphins. The back matter tells you more about the real Flute and provides practical ways to help dolphins. Thank you to Tina and the Book Deal podcast for this opportunity to share Flute with you today. Flute is available now.
I want to talk about events, author events. So there are some bookstores that do a lot of events, others don't. Can you talk perhaps a little bit about how important are bookshops to the community, firstly, and also how would you think authors should go about perhaps approaching a bookstore about doing or running an event?
I love events. We're yet to find the magic formula because they perhaps are more difficult than they would seem. Not difficult in a prohibitive way, but for a small bookstore like ours, um, we have a really small team, and so doing events in the shop, there's all sorts of hidden costs involved that may not sort of immediately pop to mind. One of the ones that no one ever thinks of that is really significant is the fact that in order to do events in the store, we have to move all of the displays, which are heavy blocks
Mhm.
full of books. And that means then have to close the shop early, which means you then potentially, you've closed the shop at 3 instead of 5. You've got 2 hours where you would normally have been open, where you're actually just paying a staff wage to do setup. And so it's all sort of finicky things like that. We have done plenty of events off-site, and we'll continue to do that. We've got things coming up in a couple of months, but for our shop at least, it's mostly 1 or 2 people who are doing them. So it's really just a personal capacity thing, I think, as well. Like, what do you feel you have the energy to do this month? Because they can be 1 or 2 man band type efforts. So there's that. I love what author events bring to a town, though, particularly a regional town. We're uncomfortably classed as regional, even though we're sort of a city, but sort of not. But I know that our readers and community love them, which is why we're constantly trying to find different ways of doing them, whether that's a off-site event space, and then the issue there is, do you have a venue hire cost, et cetera, et cetera. Or do you do them in the store where your capacity to be comfortable is about 30, therefore your potential sales are limited, therefore, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, we love them, but they maybe are not as straightforward as perhaps it seems for a tiny shop like ours. I know that other stores just have it down to a really well-oiled machine, and we will hopefully get there.
Yeah, some stores do multiple in a day and an evening and just roll
Amazing.
one after the other. Yeah.
I'm so
Yeah,
jealous.
but they're big. They're big stores with lots of space.
And staff, yeah.
Yeah.
And they can stay open. Like I think about readings, they can stay open
Yes.
to customers while also running events.
That is amazing. Isn't that just the most ideal scenario where you can have your doors open at the same time as having a dedicated event? I mean, that's just the dream.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. I want to also talk about the shortlist, the Bookseller Award. Let me get that right again. Bookseller of the Year Award, you were shortlisted for last year. What makes a good bookseller, Charlotte? And tell us about that shortlisting.
Well, I want to talk about who won, who was my amazing colleague down at the Queenscliff Bookstore, Matt Davis. He is the co-owner of the Queenscliff Bookstore with Jane Tuttle, who is also an author, and they are incredible. So if I was going to lose to anyone, I was really happy to lose to Matt because I mean the kind of work that Matt and Jane have done for the Queenscliff community. For example, they did a competition or an initiative with a local school as a writing competition, and then bound and published that into a book for the kids who had contributed to be sold in the bookstore.
Wow.
Community focused things like that, they do an enormous amount of events and initiatives. They do, fundraising. It's something that is really the spirit of what independent bookstores and booksellers should be, I think. So that's, I guess, kind of the idea of the award. I mean, every year you have just these incredible people who don't go into this line of work for the money, let's be honest. They go because they love words, writing, literature, community, and the connection, I don't know, all of those incredible things, but also are aware of the enormous work that goes on behind the scenes. So yeah, that, I don't know what makes a good bookseller. I mean, I think maybe just a sense of openness or curiosity, maybe. Curiosity is what's possible within the confines of a small business that deals with stories and voices and championing the voices that should be championed and all that sort of stuff.
I love that. What have been some of your favorite moments?
As a bookseller, well, at Christmas we have this one family who come in every year and they have a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet is sort of the central place, like that we have to say, oh, don't get that because Susan's already bought you that, or not Susan's already bought you that. That would be a spoiler, but as in, we manage, one particular family's all their Christmas buying, and it's so gorgeous and wholesome. Um, things like meeting people at very specific intersections of their lives and the reasons that maybe a non-reader would turn to a book at a specific point or for a need. Often that can be at a time of grief, and you get these insights into people and what they're going through that you sometimes wonder, like maybe close friends or certain family members do, but there is a real intimacy sometimes to being somebody's bookseller, um, because they will disclose to you what they're seeking in a story or what they're seeking from a book or what ways they would like to be surprised by something that tells you a lot about what people are grappling with. Um, that's always been very special to me because it's a sense of trust, I guess, that they entrust you with that information and that privacy, I suppose, as well. Um, yeah, and just celebrating different, I don't know, stories and yeah, it's quite. I know often being a bookseller can be overly romanticized, um, but when you're cherry picking the highlights, that they are the romantic moments because that's why you're there.
Yes, and of course, there are the less romantic moments
Yeah,
when
the
you're,
dusting,
yes, the dusting. I
the
remember that.
the endless dusting.
It's amazing how much dust can gather just over a
Oh,
few days, isn't it, on those shelves?
and the funniest thing is, just not speaking of the dust, but when people go into bookstores and they go, "Oh, I love the smell of a bookstore." And people say that to us like a lot. I've literally never smelt that smell. I don't know what it is.
You're so
And
used
I'm
to it.
used to
I
it.
well, no, but even like I've never smelt it. I was just like people come and they go, "Oh, like that paper and that ink and book smell." And I always agree as if I know what they're talking about. I have no idea what that smell is.
Do you know, in the bookstore that I used to work at, the shop next door was a schnitzel shop.
Oh,
So when I associate bookselling, associate it with the smell of schnitzel,
Fried chicken.
oh, yeah, I
which
don't
is
know
not
about
not a
that.
pleasant smell. And I
No.
must admit, yeah, and every time people would walk in, they'd go, "Ooh, it smells
Oh,
like
oh,
schnitzel."
Oh
not what I
no.
expected. Yeah, well, the shop next to us is a shoe shop, so maybe it's like a combination of paper and like boot polish.
Yeah, it's a letter. Oh, well, it's
Yeah.
a very important job, Charlotte, I think. And booksellers are
We like to think
people's
so.
lives. Literally changed people's lives, I think, for the
Yes.
authors and the people who are purchasing the books.
And
Yeah.
without the bookstores, we as authors, we wouldn't be able, and us as a publishing industry really couldn't publish the breadth and diversity that we have because if we're always looking online for our books, there's something so different, like you said, about seeing a face out book on a shelf, or even as kids coming into a store, being able to peruse all the different picture storybooks. Like you don't get that same thing online that you get in a physical bookstore.
You don't, and I think cultivating that point of difference is really essential to our survival, I think. Just the experiential nature of walking into a physical space. So shifting emphasis from the product alone and the price point, because you just can't compete on price. You can't compete with the online retailers, and you can't compete with compete with the DDSs, the discount department stores, which is a ongoing challenge to communicate why those outlets are a problem. But that's a whole other conversation. But being able to create a physical and offline experience within a space is what will keep us open. You
Mm.
know, whether it's the decorations, the smell, apparently, the lighting, I don't know, just the whole setup of the space. We have kids who form rituals around the store as a destination. Like, every Saturday morning there'll be these two little pink bikes out the front because they've chucked their bikes on the balcony before coming in to sit in the kids section for half an hour. And it creating those that living, that sense of something that's being lived in or a living thing. I don't know, it's the thing you have to use because the other aspects of it you can't beat the prices that you're facing. So yeah, it's a tricky balance.
Yeah, you're creating a space, I think. Well, I think that's a good then segue to talk about the future. How do you see the future? You attend lots of different conferences on the book industry. You very much have your finger on the pulse of it. What do you think is the future? And I know there's a lot of talk about trends and writing to trends and considering trends in your writing. So I'm interested in your thoughts before we close.
I always find trends really fascinating. I must say, I'm not chronically online, and I always feel like I'm late to the trend party. The way that I get trends is, or when I pick up trends, is through the ordering. And by the time you're ordering something, the trend has probably already been around for however long. So I do feel like a little bit of a dinosaur sometimes because I'm not on BookTok or anything like that. But I get that information in other ways. Um, trends in I'm not sure if trying to write to a trend is the best advice because trends can change so quickly and you just see them change so quickly. And by the time you've written a book, which is a long, gestation, that trend may have passed. So I think simply writing what keeps your attention and what is the question. I think sometimes writing to a question can be more engaging because it seems that it would sustain you for longer than trying to write to a market and a market that can be, so changeable. But I mean, don't take my advice as a writer because, I'm more of a bookseller. But the future, I think, people have always rung the death knell of bookstores and that it's been ringing for decades. And
It was ringing when I joined bookselling 15 years ago as well. This is the
yeah,
end.
it's not new, the idea that, bookstore and when you look at the stats, there are fewer bricks and mortar bookstores in some ways, in other ways there are more dedicated specialist bookstores like the romance bookstore that you mentioned, Tina, and that is a really emerging thing. There are a number of dedicated romance bookstores that are doing really well and are opening. Um, I think grit is necessary and just an unwavering belief in the bookstore because yeah, I mean, even before being in publishing, I was back in bookselling. I used to work in a Dymocks, and everyone was really panicked about ebooks and, you know, digital books of what the online space was going to do for bookstores. And that's not to diminish how hard it can be because you're constantly trying to um, adapt and change in order to stay relevant and stay open. But in other ways, you flourish because there are elements to your bookstore that is nowhere else. I think focusing on the bookstore as a destination and as a place that is only our place. There's only one Bookbird in Geelong, and there's only one physical place you can go that is that place, even though you can get the books elsewhere. That's what's kept us alive. I mean, we're 10 years old this year, so we're reaching that milestone, and I've been there for 7 of those 10. So, and I mean, that's a testament to the really hard work of our owner as well, Anna, who opened the bookstore in 2015. And opening a bookstore in 2015, I mean, what are you doing kind of thing? But it worked because, you know, there's a lot of smarts and hard work to make keeping it going. I don't know. I don't know what the future is, but I hope it's bright.
Oh, I feel optimistic with you as a bookseller, Charlotte. I
Oh,
think
thanks.
it sounds wonderful. And, for those listeners who are in Victoria or visiting Victoria, visiting regional Victoria, even though Geelong is a city. Don't want to upset any of our Geelong listeners. Do definitely go down and visit Charlotte at the Bookbird. It sounds like a very special place. Now, to finish, we always ask our guests one final question, Charlotte, and I probably didn't prep you for this as well. Could you give us, you've given us so much already, but could you give us one last top tip for emerging writers?
I thought you were going to ask me what am I reading, and I was all prepared to give you my book recommendation.
You can also give us your book recommendations. I would love to know your book recommendations.
I might pivot to that because I don't know if I
Yes.
have any writers. I have tips for booksellers, but I don't know about writers. I mean, writers, you
I
know,
feel like you've got a lot of tips, Charlotte. I'm sure we've talked writing before, and I
we
feel like you definitely do.
we have. I don't know if I can claim to have any really great tips, but I'll tell you what I'm reading,
Do.
which is a couple of things that I would recommend. I Am Nanook by Tasma Walton was incredible. A new book. It's her second novel by Bunwarong writer and actor. People might be more familiar with her as an actor, but you should absolutely read her novel. It is a really generous and harrowing portrayal of her ancestor Nanook on Bunwarong country, who was kidnapped by sealers during that violent period in Australian colonial history. The element of the novel that I really loved sort of relates back to what I loved about A Clockwork Orange, which is that throughout the prose, Tasma weaves Bunwarong language through it. So a non-speaker can pick up words and learn language within the context of fiction, which is a very different way to learn language than, say, in a classroom. It's like you start absorbing it by osmosis, and it's so beautiful. So I would highly recommend that novel. It's been out for maybe a month.
I saw Tasma Walton at the Sorrento Writers Festival actually on a panel with Anita Heiss, and it was just a fantastic and extraordinary story, and it's on my to be read pile. So I'm going to
You
elevate
must
that.
read it. Yeah, and I think it's by a new imprint that is
Yes.
published by Anita Heiss. So that's really one to watch. The other book that I would recommend is By Her Hand by Marion Taff, that I just adored. Another example of historical fiction, but 10th century Mercia this time, which is England before it was England, looking at Old English poetry. Again, really interested in language and the way we form and unform ourselves through words and writing. Really one for writers, and the history of writing and scriptoriums. Just so much I could say about it, but I know that we're running out of time, so I'll just let people find it for themselves.
And we've interviewed Marion on our podcast.
Oh, fabulous.
Which is, yes, I've read By Her Hand twice now because we did an event together, and it is an extraordinary novel.
I can't believe it's her debut.
I know.
Isn't that crazy?
When we first, so we've known Marion, Tina and I now for a couple of years now, wouldn't it be, Tina? And I remember when we were all talking about our practices and the way Marion was describing her depth of research in terms of the Old English and how she interrogated the history and even her writing practice. She said that she didn't write chapters; she just wrote and got the story and the flow. And so we always knew it was going to be an extraordinary novel, didn't we, Tina?
Yes, but that story has always horrified me of just writing it in one continuous flow and then having to put chapters in it at the end. But
Tina's a very good plotter and planner.
Oh my goodness, I didn't realize that's how she wrote it. That's incredible.
Yes. And so she had to manually try and work out the beats where she would put chapters, insert chapters. So
that sounds like, sorry, Tina.
No, I was just going to say instinctual writing though. She knows where everything needs to go and it's just about tidying it up at the end. So whatever you've got to do to get the words out on the paper,
Well, it's obviously working, so I hope she
Mhm,
writes all her
mhm.
novels that way.
Yeah.
Yes, we agree. Well, Marion is a podcast friend, so hopefully, I'm sure she'll be listening into this, and we can tag her. Thanks for that recommendation.
Welcome.
All right, Tina, was there anything else?
No, I was just going to say, I'm sorry. I feel like I was a bit quiet because I at times forgot that I was here and I thought I was.
I'm
As
sorry,
in,
I feel like I spoke in a great big rush for most of
no,
that.
you were perfect. But what I do is I actually, when I'm on camera, I actually move my screen so I can't even see myself because I find that really distracting. So I've just been watching you two and I felt like I was just listening to a podcast episode.
Oh,
It was
good.
very interesting. And then I'd be like, oh, I should ask more about that. I can because I'm here. So anyway, you guys were great.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Charlotte Guest, so much for joining us on the Book Deal podcast. We know that writers, readers, booksellers will just find this podcast very fascinating. And I feel like we have to come back in a few years and see what the future of the industry is going to look like. And I'm hoping it will be a very positive one for
I
indie
hope so
bookstores.
too.
Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. Thank you for listening to the Book Deal podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the pod so you can receive updates as soon as our new eps drop. And to keep up to date with what the pod is doing, you can also find us on Instagram.